Our political editor Andrew Clennell joins us once again. Mike Burgess speaking very frankly last night, warning that the threats are on a number of fronts, Andrew Clennell. They come from foreign espionage, white supremacy, and the terror threat remains.
Yes, pretty concerning all of that, isn't it? I went to the speech, but I think the overwhelming tone of it was reassurance. We're on top of it all, seemed to be the message. We're close to a prosecution in one matter. We've kicked people out of the country, we've cancelled visas, we've stopped terror plots. So overall, I know there's this reporting which is fair enough about all the, the sleeper agent and all the fears around terror groups and right-wing Nazi groups and all that, but Mr Burgess was really pointing out that ASIO was doing its job, and despite this number of threats to Australia, that it was kind of in control, was the message he was saying. Yeah,
it was interesting. We had James Patterson on a short time ago, and he was saying that this is a speech that should now be done every year, outlining all of these threats and reassuring people that what is being done is the right thing to do, especially when there's so many different parts that are attached to it anyway when it comes to espionage. But on to probably the hottest topic of the year, hard to go past climate change, net zero emissions. It's probably going to be the hottest topic throughout the year too. Andrew, you're breaking stories left, right and centre. What are your sources telling you about the developments of the last 24 hours?
Well, I just think that Anthony Albanese's rolled the dice, and he's done so, Peter, in order to say that I stand for something. And he hasn't been able to do that since he became opposition leader last June or May. And now he's able to say, this is what I stand for. Now, critics of him will say, well, you're proving yourself a warrior of the left. There's danger for you here. You haven't put any detail behind the target. And fair enough too, his argument would be, I've got a couple of years to do that, and this is better than the shortened approach of just doing it a few weeks before the election and getting hammered. The other thing that, a lot of people in Canberra are telling me, and I think it's borne out by research around the election, is that franking credits and negative gearing played much more of a role than climate change. That's not to say that I kind of think the journalistic class doesn't understand that climate change isn't the #1 issue for most people. Cost of living is. But nevertheless, it's increasing as an issue. And, I think as many votes as Morrison could win with his current stance in Queensland, he could lose in Victoria and parts of Sydney. So there's kind of elements of risk to both strategies, but I don't think there's any doubt that Morrison won't go with net zero emissions 2050. And I think the Paris Agreement was for the second half of the century, not just 2050. So he could say he's still sticking by the Paris Agreement. And he's got something to whack Anthony Albanese with after a long, hard summer. Look, I think we've just had a summer of fear in Australia. You've had the fires, you've had the virus, you got Adam Crichton on your show this morning saying we're going to have a recession. I've been still talking to senior people in government about that this morning. They're really playing that down. They really believe that's not the case, because even though the coronavirus is having massive effect, the jobs are still reasonably strong, and the iron ore price is good, as Mark Kenny said on your program. So that's being downplayed, but now we've got the fear of foreign interference and terrorism and all that. I mean, it's just fear from every corner in politics at the moment.
Yep, on climate change, look, I think Anthony Albanese and Labor was always going to end up at this point of zero net emissions by 2050. They're in good company with more than 70 other countries and most states in and around Australia. The timing, I would question whether it was the right time, but as you say, Andrew, nothing really matters. News poll doesn't matter until, a week or a couple of weeks before the next election. So he is rolling the dice in many ways, and without, they've had the review. They don't have any firm policies really on anything, and this is one issue where he can actually get his team together. He's got Joel Fitzgibbon on board, who is really a chief head kicker at the moment, and he needs to be front and centre. So he's got parts of that Otis group on board, and that's going to be critical for him going forward, isn't it?
Well, publicly they're on board.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think you'll find the Otis Group was formed after this policy went through Shadow Ministry, Laura, and that says something in itself. So they might they might even theoretically agree with the policy, but they just see that group of MPs sees a lot of danger in this. I mean, and often it's self-interest, as we always talk about, Laura, like Joel Fitzgibbon sees a problem with it in his own electorate. And, you know, I've been on your program bagging Anthony Albanese for months saying he doesn't have a policy, so I can hardly really bag him when he has one, except there's a lack of detail, and I really think in order to say, the government's justified in saying, in order to say how you're going to get there in 2050, you need to give us a shorter-term target and some methods on how you're going to get there. So I'd like to see a 2035 target, show us how we sort of get towards 2050, otherwise it very much looks like an aspiration. And so you're going to have this crazy situation this week or next where you've got the opposition with a target and the government releasing a technology investment roadmap about how they would achieve lower emissions. So one side's going to have a target with no way on how to get there, and the other side's going to show us how to get there but not have a target. I mean, it's crazy, really.
Andrew, I know you've dabbled a little in cricket in the last couple of years, and not to Trump bash too much, but the comments overnight, the speech that he delivered in India was a little funny. Let's play that now.
This is the country where your people cheer on some of the world's greatest cricket players, from Sachin Tendulkar to Virat Kohli.
We're not Trump bashing at all. We are lauding that this morning.
It's just kind of funny pronunciation of two people who are gods in India.
Exactly. And when Andrew Clennell, you say there's so much doom and gloom around, I hope this brings a smile to your face this morning.
Well, it does. And what was peculiar when I first saw that is, why do they cheer? Because Sachin Tendulkar's like a god in that country. You'd think they'd boo when he got his name wrong or not cheer. But look, I mean, I remember like a few years ago, I went on holiday in India, and yeah, I mean, everywhere you went, they talked cricket and they talked Sachin Tendulkar in particular. There was absolutely no doubt how crazy they were about Sachin. And I mean,
I think this is probably
in trouble after that.
Yeah, I think this might be played fairly frequently, particularly in cricketing circles.
Like the time. This is like the time that Bob Carr went to address the New South Wales players before the State of Origin and gave them this rousing speech, and then at the end he said, "Good luck against Victoria tonight."
He's not the only political leader, premier or prime minister that's done that, got their codes a little mixed up in their states too. But on that note, Andrew, namaste. Have a wonderful day.
See ya.